A little girl signaled to a police dog while being carried away, and his reaction saved her from something terrifying. It happened in less than 2 seconds. A single gesture that most people would have completely missed. What you're about to hear is how one silent cry for help triggered a chain reaction that exposed an evil nobody saw coming and saved 5 children from disappearing forever. Officer Marcus Chen had been patrolling downtown for 7 years. He knew every corner, every alley, every shop owner by name. He could tell you which coffee shop owner always left their back door unlocked, which homeless veteran preferred the park bench near 5th and Main, and which teenagers hung around the arcade looking for trouble. And he knew the rhythm of the streets, the ebb and flow of crowds, the patterns of crime, the invisible lines that separated safe from dangerous. Duke, his German Shepherd partner, knew it even better. The dog had been with Marcus for 5 years, and in that time, they'd become more than just colleagues. They were extensions of each other. Together, they'd made over 200 arrests. Duke could smell fear, aggression, and deception from 50 feet away. He could read body language the way humans read words. He was trained, disciplined, and relied upon by every officer in the precinct. The K-9 unit had the highest clearance rate in the department, and most of that success came down to Duke's uncanny ability to sense danger before it materialized. On this particular afternoon in late September, everything seemed normal on the surface. The weather was clear and mild, perfect for an autumn day in the city. The crowds were moderate, not the weekend rush, but not the quiet emptiness of a weekday morning either. Marcus and Duke were finishing their last hour of patrol before heading back to the station for shift change. It was supposed to be an unremarkable day. The kind of day where nothing happened. The kind of day officers looked forward to. No incidents, no paperwork, no drama. But Duke knew something Marcus didn't. The dog's ears perked up first. Then his entire body went rigid, muscles tensing beneath his short fur. Marcus felt the shift immediately. Duke's leash tightened, and the dog's breathing changed from the easy, rhythmic pattern of a relaxed walk to something sharper, more alert. Something had triggered him. Not a threat, not aggression. Something else entirely. Something that made Duke's entire body vibrate with urgency, like a tuning fork struck at exactly the right frequency. "Easy, boy," Marcus whispered. But he was already scanning the crowd, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his belt. His training kicked in automatically. When Duke reacted like this, you listened. That's when he saw them. A man in his mid-40s, wearing a dark jacket despite the warm afternoon. His face was unremarkable, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. And in his arms, carried like a father would carry a sleeping child after a long day at the park, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, pink backpack slung over one shoulder, and her eyes were open, very open, alert, scanning the crowd as if looking for something or someone. Marcus's instinct fired like a flare gun. Something was wrong. Everything about the scene screamed wrongness, even though he couldn't articulate exactly why. The man wasn't walking like a father. His movements were too deliberate, too controlled, too careful, as if he was acutely aware of every eye that might be watching him. He wasn't enjoying a leisurely stroll with his daughter. He was moving with purpose, moving away from the crowded shopping district toward the quieter streets, toward the industrial section where foot traffic disappeared and buildings stood empty, where a scream would echo off concrete and brick and fade into nothing. Duke pulled harder on the leash, his nails scraping against the pavement. Marcus followed, keeping his distance. He told himself he was just being cautious, doing his job. The man could be the girl's father. He could be taking her home from school. He could be a grandfather picking her up for the weekend. There was no crime being committed, no law being broken, nothing he could point to and say, "That's illegal." No violation he could articulate that would stand up in court. But Duke knew, and Marcus was beginning to know too. The problem was, knowing wasn't enough. Not yet. Not without evidence. Not without probable cause. Not without something concrete that would hold up in court and justify stopping a man and questioning him about his own child. The law was clear about that. You needed grounds. You needed something more than a feeling, no matter how strong that feeling was. Marcus was trapped between what his gut was screaming and what the law allowed him to do. It was a gap he'd felt before. That terrible space between instinct and procedure. Between knowing something was wrong and having the legal authority to act on that knowledge. And somewhere in that gap, in that terrible liminal space between suspicion and proof, a little girl's life hung in the balance. Marcus kept his distance, maintaining a gap of about 30 yards between himself and the man. Close enough to intervene if needed. Far enough away that his presence wouldn't be immediately obvious. He'd learned this technique over 7 years of patrol work, the art of following without being noticed, of being a shadow in plain sight. Duke stayed at his side, but the dog's attention never wavered from the pair ahead. The leash remained taut, a constant reminder that Duke was locked onto something Marcus needed to understand. The dog's muscles were coiled like springs, ready to explode into action at a moment's notice. The man turned down Aldrich Street, a narrow road lined with abandoned warehouses and closed manufacturing plants. This was the part of downtown that the city had forgotten, the part that city planners pretended didn't exist in their glossy brochures and development proposals, the part where development had stalled a decade ago, where businesses had relocated to the suburbs or gone under entirely, where the buildings stood like hollow teeth in a broken smile. Graffiti covered the lower portions of the walls. Broken windows stared out like empty eye sockets. There were no cameras on this street, no security systems, no witnesses, no one to hear anything that might happen in the shadows between these structures. It was the kind of place where people disappeared. Marcus's hand moved to his radio, but he didn't call it in yet. His finger hovered over the transmit button as he wrestled with the decision. What would he say? That a man was carrying a child down a quiet street? That wasn't a crime. That was just parenting, or babysitting, or a grandfather taking his granddaughter somewhere. But it could also be kidnapping. And he had no way to know which. No probable cause, no evidence, just a feeling. Just Duke's reaction. Just the way the man was walking and the way the girl's eyes were moving. The girl's head turned slightly as they walked. Her eyes scanned the street behind them, searching, assessing. When she saw Marcus, something flickered across her face like lightning in a distant storm. Recognition, fear, hope, a silent plea for help. It was too brief to tell, lasting only a fraction of a second. But it was there. A moment of connection between a child and a stranger. And in that moment, Marcus knew with absolute certainty. This was wrong. Everything about this situation was fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. The man felt it too. He must have sensed Marcus's presence or noticed the girl's reaction, the way her body language shifted slightly. His pace quickened. He was no longer walking casually down the street like a man without a care in the world. He was moving with purpose now, his arms tightening around the girl, his jaw clenching, his head turning just slightly to check if he was being followed. His breathing had changed. His entire demeanor had shifted from casual to predatory. Duke barked. A sharp, commanding sound that echoed off the warehouse walls and seemed to multiply, bouncing back and forth between the brick and concrete. It was the bark of a dog who had identified a threat and was announcing it to the world. It was a warning. It was a challenge. It was a promise. The man broke into a run. Marcus didn't hesitate. He released Duke from his side and sprinted forward, his legs pumping, his police training overriding any doubt or caution. His radio was already at his lips, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "This is Unit 7. We have a possible 10 to 31 in progress on Aldrich Street near 5th. Male, mid-40s, dark jacket, carrying a female child, approximately 7 years old. Suspect is fleeing on foot toward the warehouse district. Request, immediate backup." The dispatcher's voice crackled back immediately, professional and urgent. "Unit 7, all units responding. Backup is en route. ETA 3 minutes. Proceed with caution." But Marcus knew backup wouldn't arrive in time. Not on Aldrich Street. Not in this forgotten part of town where response times were measured in minutes. And minutes were an eternity when a child's life was at stake. Minutes were the difference between rescue and tragedy. Minutes were the difference between a child coming home and a missing persons report. Duke was faster than the man. The dog had been bred and trained for exactly this moment, and his body knew what to do with perfect instinctual precision. The dog closed the distance in seconds, his massive frame moving with the grace and power of a predator, his paws barely seeming to touch the ground. The man saw Duke coming and panicked, his eyes widening, his grip on the girl loosening slightly. He tried to dodge left, toward one of the warehouse entrances, a desperate attempt to lose the dog in the maze of buildings. But Duke cut him off with the precision of a chess master, snapping at his heels, forcing him to stop, forcing him to choose between running and protecting himself. The girl tumbled from his arms as he fell, landing hard on the concrete with a grunt of pain. She lay there for a moment, stunned, gasping for breath, her small body trembling. And then she did something that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his career. Something that would change everything. She looked directly at him and raised her hand. Not in greeting. Not in a wave of relief or recognition. Her hand was raised with 2 fingers extended, a V shape, like a peace sign. But it wasn't peaceful. It was urgent. It was deliberate. It was a signal. And her mouth moved, forming words that Marcus couldn't hear over the sound of Duke's barking, the man's shouts, and the pounding of his own heartbeat in his ears. But he could read her lips. He could see the shape of the words forming on her mouth, the desperation in her eyes. Help us. Us. Not just her. Not just one child in a pink backpack. Multiple children. Plural. And in that moment, Marcus understood that what he was looking at wasn't a simple kidnapping, wasn't a custody dispute or a family emergency. This was something bigger, something darker, something that involved more victims than just the girl in the pink backpack. This was organized. This was deliberate. This was evil. The man was on the ground now, Duke pinning him down with his full weight, his teeth bared in a snarl that showed every fang. The man was screaming, struggling, thrashing, but the dog had him completely immobilized, completely controlled. Every time he tried to move, Duke's jaws tightened. Every time he tried to roll, the dog shifted his weight to keep him pinned. Marcus ran toward them, his training taking over, his hands already reaching for the restraints on his belt. But as he approached, the girl did something else. She scrambled backward, away from both Marcus and the man, her small body moving with surprising speed. Her eyes were wide with terror, but not of the man, of Marcus. She was afraid of him too, afraid of all adults, afraid of the world that had hurt her. "It's okay," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and calm, the way you'd speak to a frightened animal. "I'm a police officer. You're safe now. You're going to be okay." But the girl shook her head violently, her whole body trembling. She pointed behind Marcus, toward the warehouse they'd been running toward, the building that loomed over them like a giant tombstone. Her arm was shaking so badly that Marcus could barely follow her gesture. "They're in there," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper, each word seeming to cost her enormous effort. "All of them. They're all in there. The other children, they're locked in there." Marcus's blood went cold. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees in an instant. His mind raced, processing the implications, understanding what this meant. Not one victim. Not two. Multiple children. A operation. A network. A systematic abduction ring operating in his city, in his precinct, right under his nose. "How many?" Marcus asked, already moving toward the warehouse, his radio in his hand. "I don't know," the girl sobbed. "5. Maybe 6. Maybe more. They keep moving us around. I lost count." Marcus's mind shifted into overdrive, processing information at lightning speed while his body remained perfectly still, a statue of calm in the midst of chaos. The warehouse loomed before him, a massive structure of red brick and rusted steel that seemed to swallow the afternoon light whole, consuming it into its shadowy depths. 5 stories tall, with broken windows on every level like shattered eyes staring down at the street below, and a loading dock on the ground floor that gaped open like a mouth frozen in a silent scream. This building had been abandoned for at least a decade, maybe longer, perhaps 15 or 20 years. It was the kind of place that had become invisible to the city, the kind of place that urban planners and city officials preferred to forget existed. It was the kind of place where anything could happen and no one would ever know. No one would ever ask questions. No one would ever come looking. He keyed his radio again, his voice urgent but controlled, each word carefully chosen and delivered with precision. "Dispatch. We have multiple victims, possibly 5 to 6 children, held in the abandoned warehouse at 847 Aldrich Street. This is now a code red. I'm requesting SWAT, Child Protective Services, Fire Department, and a full emergency response. Do not approach until backup arrives. I repeat, do not approach the building without backup. Establish a wide perimeter. We may be dealing with explosives or other hazards." The dispatcher's voice came back immediately. "All business, all professionalism. Unit 7, all units are being diverted to your location. ETA 2 minutes for first responders, 4 minutes for SWAT, 6 minutes for tactical team. Maintain visual on the suspect and the victim. Do not enter the building under any circumstances. Repeat, do not enter." But Marcus was already looking at the warehouse, calculating distances and angles with the precision of a chess player, thinking strategically about what might be happening inside those walls. Every second that passed was a second those children remained in danger, trapped in darkness, probably terrified beyond measure. Every moment they spent waiting for backup was a moment something terrible could be happening to them. He could feel the weight of those seconds, the burden of knowing that lives hung in the balance. The girl, Sophie, was still shaking violently, her small body racked with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, from a place of pure trauma and terror. Marcus knelt down beside her, keeping his movement slow and deliberate, smooth and non-threatening, so as not to frighten her further. He wanted to seem safe, trustworthy, like someone who could protect her from the horrors she'd endured. "What's your name?" he asked gently, his voice soft and warm, the way you'd speak to a frightened animal. says Sophie, she whispered, her voice barely audible, each word seeming to require enormous effort. Sophie Chen. The name hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Chen, his last name, his family name. For a moment, his mind reeled with the implications. Was this a coincidence? Was there a connection? But he pushed the thought aside, forcing himself to focus. There were thousands of Chens in the city, hundreds of little girls with that surname. This wasn't about him. This was about her. This was about a child who had been kidnapped and held captive and needed help. "Okay, Sophie," he said, his voice steady and reassuring despite the chaos erupting around them, despite the sirens in the distance getting closer. "You're very brave. You did exactly the right thing. You were incredibly courageous. Can you tell me about the other children? What are their names? What do they look like?" Sophie's eyes darted toward the warehouse. Marcus could see the fear in them, a primal, animal terror that came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that had been wounded and broken by whatever she'd experienced. It was the look of someone who had seen things no child should ever see, experienced things no child should ever experience. "There's Marcus," she said. And Marcus realized with a chill running down his spine that there was another Marcus among the victims, another child sharing his name, and Lily, and Jacob, and... She paused, her face scrunching up as she tried to remember, as she dug through the fog of trauma and fear to retrieve the information. And Emma. And maybe another boy. But I don't remember his name. They keep us separated most of the time. They don't let us talk to each other. They say if we talk, bad things will happen. How long have you been here, Sophie? How long have you been in that warehouse? Marcus asked, his mind already working through the timeline, trying to understand the scope of this operation. "I don't know," Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. "Days, maybe a week, maybe longer. I lost count. Time doesn't work the same way in there. It's always dark. They took me from the park near my school. I was waiting for my mom to pick me up, and a man came and said my mom sent him to get me because she was in an accident. He said she was hurt. He said I needed to come with him right away. I believed him. I was stupid." "You weren't stupid," Marcus said firmly, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "You were a child. Children trust adults. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what society teaches you to do. You're supposed to trust the adults in your life. That's not stupidity. That's innocence. And what happened to you is not your fault. Not in any way. That's on them. That's on the monsters who took you." Behind him, Duke had the man pinned to the ground with his full weight. And Marcus could hear sirens in the distance now, getting closer, multiplying. Multiple sirens. Multiple vehicles. The cavalry was coming. But those sirens also meant something else. They meant the people inside that warehouse would know they were coming. They would hear those sirens and understand that their time was running out. They would know they had minutes, maybe less, to do something with their hostages. And desperate people did desperate things. Marcus stood up slowly, his hand moving to his service weapon, feeling the weight of it at his hip. He looked at the warehouse, then back at Sophie, then at the man on the ground beneath Duke's weight. The man was staring at Marcus with an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. His lips curled back in a snarl that revealed his teeth. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," the man spat, his voice filled with venom. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. No idea who's inside that building. No idea what's going to happen. No idea what you've started." "Tell me," Marcus said, his voice cold and hard as steel. Tell me right now, and maybe, the judge shows some mercy when you go to trial. Maybe you don't get life without parole. Maybe you get a chance at redemption." The man laughed, a sound like breaking glass, like something sharp and dangerous. "Mercy? There's no mercy for any of us now. Not for me. Not for those kids. Not for you when you find out what's really going on. You think this is just about kidnapping? You think this is just about a few missing children? You have no idea. This goes so much deeper than that. This involves people you'd never suspect, people with power, people with connections." The sirens were getting louder now, the sound becoming almost unbearable. Marcus could see the first police cars turning onto Aldrich Street, their lights painting the warehouse and the surrounding buildings in alternating red and blue, creating a strobe effect that made everything seem surreal and dreamlike. Officers were pouring out of their vehicles, taking positions, establishing a perimeter around the entire block. Within seconds, the entire street had been transformed into an active crime scene, a place of controlled chaos and professional urgency. Detective Sarah Williams was the first to reach Marcus. She was a 15-year veteran of the department, tough as nails, with a reputation for solving the cases that everyone else had given up on. She had short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took in the scene at a glance, the suspect pinned by the dog, the traumatized child wrapped in herself, the warehouse looming in the background like a monument to evil. "Talk to me," she said, not wasting time on pleasantries or protocol. She was all business, all focus. Marcus filled her in quickly, his words tumbling out in a rapid-fire stream of information, each detail important, each piece of the puzzle critical to understanding what they were facing. Sophie's story, the other children, the warehouse, the suspect's cryptic warning about not knowing who was inside, the man's hints about people with power and connections. Sarah's face grew darker as she listened, her jaw tightening, her hands clenching into fists. When he finished, she was already on her radio, calling for a tactical team, requesting that they establish a perimeter around the entire building, ordering all units to maintain distance until SWAT arrived. She was taking charge, commanding the scene with the authority of someone who had done this before. "We need to get those kids out," Marcus said, the urgency evident in his voice. "Every second we wait." "I know," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of experience and hard-won wisdom. "But we do this right, or we risk getting those children killed. We need to know what we're walking into. We need to know how many hostiles are in there, what kind of weapons they have, what kind of defenses they've set up. We need intelligence before we move." As if in response to her words, as if the universe itself was answering her statement, the warehouse door suddenly swung open with a screech of rusted hinges. A figure emerged from the darkness inside. A tall man with a shaved head and a scarred face, his body marked by violence and hard living. He was holding something in his hand, something that caught the light and gleamed ominously. It took Marcus a moment to realize what it was, and when he did, his blood turned to ice. A detonator, a small electronic device with a button on top, the kind of thing that could trigger an explosion, the kind of thing that could level a building and everyone inside it. "Stay back," the man shouted, his voice echoing across the empty street, bouncing off the brick and concrete. "One more step and I blow this whole building to hell. And I take every kid in here with me. You understand me? One more step and it's all over." The street fell silent. The sirens cut off. The officers froze in place, their hands moving away from their weapons. Everything came to a complete stop, as if the entire world was holding its breath. The world seemed to freeze in that moment, suspended in time like a photograph captured at the exact instant before something catastrophic occurs. Every officer on the street became a statue carved from stone and tension. Every breath held deep in their chests, every muscle tensed and ready for action. The man with the detonator stood in the warehouse doorway like a dark angel of death, silhouetted against the gloom and shadows behind him, his figure backlit by the dying afternoon light filtering through the broken windows above. His finger hovered over the button with casual menace, as if he were casually considering whether to press it right now, as if the lives of 6 innocent children meant nothing more to him than a passing thought, a momentary distraction from his grand plans. Detective Sarah Williams stepped forward slowly, deliberately, her hands raised in a gesture of peace and complete surrender. Her movements were measured and careful, the practiced movements of someone who had done this before, who understood the delicate and dangerous dance of negotiation with a person teetering on the edge of madness and violence. She had negotiated with suicidal people, with hostage takers, with people who had nothing left to lose. She knew the psychology. She knew the patterns. She knew what worked and what didn't. "My name is Detective Sarah Williams," she called out, her voice steady and calm, projected across the distance between them with careful control and precision. "I'm with the police department. I'm here to help. What's your name? Can you tell me your name? I'd like to know who I'm talking to." The man laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that seemed to scrape against the very air itself, like nails on a chalkboard, like something broken and twisted. "My name? You want to know my name? So you can put it in your reports? So you can tell the news cameras who the bad guy is? So you can make me famous?" He shook his head violently, his entire body convulsing with the force of his denial. "My name doesn't matter. Nothing about me matters. What matters is that I have 6 children in here, locked behind reinforced doors and barred windows. What matters is that I have enough explosives to turn this entire building into rubble and dust. What matters is that you're going to do exactly what I say, or they all die. Every single one of them will die, and it will be on your hands." Marcus watched from his position, partially concealed behind a parked sedan, his mind racing at incredible speed, analyzing every detail of the man's appearance, his demeanor, his speech patterns, his body language. The way he held the detonator suggested he'd used one before, that this wasn't his first time threatening people with explosives. The way he stood suggested military training, the kind of rigid posture that came from years of discipline and structure. The scars on his face suggested a life of violence, a life lived on the edge of civilization. This wasn't some amateur who had stumbled into this situation. This was someone dangerous, someone capable, someone who might actually follow through on his threats without hesitation or remorse. "Okay," Sarah said, taking another small step forward, her hands still raised. "Okay, I understand. You have leverage. You have the children. You have explosives. You're in control of the situation. I respect that. I'm not going to do anything that would put those children in danger. But I need to know, are the children okay? Are they hurt? Can I at least know that they're alive and unharmed? Can you give me that assurance?" The man's expression twisted into something that might have been a smile. But it was a smile devoid of warmth or humanity. A smile that belonged to someone who had lost their connection to normal human emotion. Alive. Yeah, they're alive. For now. Whether they stay that way depends entirely on you and your friends in blue. Depends on whether you're smart enough to follow my instructions without deviation or delay. He gestured with the detonator toward the officers positioned around the street, their weapons holstered, their hands visible. "First thing you're going to do is pull back. I want every police officer on this street to move back at least 200 yards. I want to see clear space between me and you. I want to see empty pavement. And I want to see it happen now, or I start removing fingers. 1 finger for every 10 seconds you delay. You understand me? 1 finger every 10 seconds. Sarah's jaw tightened, the muscles working beneath her skin. But she nodded. She understood what was happening. She understood the psychology of a hostage-taker who was establishing dominance, who was testing the authorities to see if they would comply with his demands. She keyed her radio and began issuing orders, her voice calm and professional despite the horror of what the man was threatening, despite the knowledge of what he was capable of doing. All units, fall back 200 yards. Establish a new perimeter at the corner of 5th and Aldrich. Move now. Move deliberately, but without panic. Do not run. Do not show fear. Move with purpose and control. The officers began to move, retreating slowly and methodically, maintaining visual contact with the warehouse at all times. It was a calculated risk. Give the hostage-taker what he wanted to keep the children alive, to preserve their lives, but not so much that he felt completely in control, not so much that he felt he could ask for anything and receive it. It was a delicate balance, like walking a tightrope strung over an abyss, like performing a high-wire act without a safety net, knowing that one misstep meant death for innocent children. Marcus remained where he was, partially hidden behind the parked car, his position carefully chosen to maintain sight lines while staying out of the man's direct field of vision. Duke was still with him, the dog's eyes never leaving the man in the doorway. The dog's muscles coiled and ready, prepared to spring into action at a moment's notice if needed. The suspect, who had been pinned to the ground by Duke's weight, was now being secured by 2 officers. Handcuffed and placed in the back of a police car, his face twisted in rage and defiance. But Marcus knew that man was just a small part of something much larger, much more sinister, much more deeply embedded in the fabric of society than anyone realized. "Good," the man in the doorway said, watching as the officers retreated further and further away, creating the space he demanded. "Very good. You're being smart. You're being cooperative. That's what I want to see. That's what I expect from people who understand the situation they're in." He paused, his expression shifting, changing, becoming almost contemplative. And then his expression changed again, becoming something darker, something more menacing. His hand with the detonator moved slightly, and he reached into the warehouse with his other hand, disappearing into the shadows for a moment. When he pulled it back out, he was holding something that made Marcus's heart stop, made his blood turn to ice, made the world seem to tilt on its axis. It was a child. A boy, no more than 8 years old, with tears streaming down his face in rivers of anguish and fear, and his hands bound behind his back with what looked like plastic zip ties. The man held him by the collar of his shirt, dangling him slightly, as if he were a puppet on a string, as if the boy were a doll to be manipulated and controlled. The boy was trembling, his entire body shaking with terror and shock. "This is Marcus," the man said, and the name hit Marcus like a physical blow, like a punch to the gut that knocked the wind out of him. "He's one of my guests. He's been very cooperative, very quiet, very well behaved. But he's also very expendable, just like all the others in here. You understand? They're all expendable to me. They're commodities. They're products. They're nothing but a means to an end, a way for me to achieve my objectives. Their lives mean nothing to me. Their suffering means nothing to me. They're just tools." Sarah's voice came through the radio, steady but with an undertone of controlled fury, of rage, barely contained beneath a professional veneer. Negotiation team is en route. ETA 5 minutes. All units maintain position. Do not engage the suspect under any circumstances. I repeat, do not engage. The man pulled the boy back into the warehouse, and the door swung partially closed, cutting off the view inside. But before it did, Marcus caught a glimpse of what was beyond that threshold, beyond that barrier between the outside world and the darkness within. Darkness, shadows, and movement. Multiple figures moving in the shadows, small figures, child-sized figures. Children, he thought with absolute certainty. All those children, trapped in that darkness, imprisoned in that warehouse, held captive by a madman with explosives and a detonator. Marcus's radio crackled to life. It was Sarah's voice, but not on the main channel, not on the frequency monitored by all units. She'd switched to a private frequency, a secure channel just for him and her. A direct line of communication. I'm reading you, Unit 7. I know you're out there. I need you to stay calm and stay in position. Do not do anything rash. We have a negotiation team coming. We have SWAT positioning themselves in optimal locations. We're going to get those children out of there safely. That's a promise. Detective, Marcus responded quietly, keeping his voice low so as not to be overheard by anyone nearby, his words carefully chosen. That man in the doorway, he's not acting alone. I can feel it. He said the children were products. He said they were commodities. This is organized trafficking. This is a network. This is something bigger than one warehouse and one madman. That man on the ground, the one Duke pinned, he's just a collector, a low-level operative. There's someone higher up, someone running the operation from the shadows, someone pulling the strings. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a moment of silence that seemed to stretch on forever. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was different. Harder, more determined, more focused. I know. We're already working on it. The FBI has been notified. They're sending a team from the field office downtown. They should be here within the hour. But right now, our priority is getting those children out alive. Everything else comes second. Protecting those children is all that matters. Understood, Marcus said. I'll stay in position and maintain surveillance. The next few minutes felt like hours, stretched out and distorted by tension and adrenaline. The negotiation team arrived in a black SUV. A psychologist named Dr. Patricia Chen and a seasoned negotiator named Robert Valdez, a man who had successfully negotiated the release of hostages in over 200 situations. They set up a command center in a mobile unit parked 2 blocks away, equipped with sophisticated communications equipment and tactical displays that showed real-time positions of all units and personnel. They established contact with the man in the warehouse through a dedicated phone line, trying to understand his motivations, his demands, his psychological state, his vulnerabilities. The man, who eventually identified himself as Vincent Corr during one of the phone conversations, claimed to be part of something he called the network. He said he was just one small piece of a much larger operation that spanned multiple states, multiple cities, multiple countries even. He said there were people protecting him from above. People in positions of power who had invested heavily in his operation, people with resources and connections that extended into every level of law enforcement and government. He said that if anything happened to him, those people would make sure the children disappeared, would make sure there was no evidence, no witnesses, nothing but silence and denial. You think you're in control, Vincent said through the phone, his voice cold and measured, and utterly devoid of emotion. Speaking to Robert Valdez, with the calm of someone discussing the weather. But you're not. You're all just pieces on a board. And the people moving the pieces are people you'll never catch. People you'll never even know about. People who exist in the shadows, pulling strings, making decisions. They've been doing this for decades. They've built something beautiful and terrible and unstoppable. Marcus listened to the negotiations from his hidden position, his mind working through the implications at incredible speed, analyzing every word, every pause, every inflection in Vincent's voice. If what Vincent was saying was true, and there was no reason to think he was lying about this, at least about this particular aspect, then this was bigger than just one warehouse, one man, one group of children. This was a systemic problem. This was corruption at the highest levels of society. This was evil embedded in the very fabric of civilization, woven into the institutions that were supposed to protect people, especially children. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep crimson, the situation reached a critical and dangerous point. Vincent made new demands. He demanded a vehicle, a van with a full tank of gas, to be delivered to the warehouse loading dock within 30 minutes. He said he would release 2 of the children as a show of good faith, as a demonstration of his willingness to negotiate, but only if his demands were met within the specified time frame. He said that for every minute past the deadline, he would hurt one of the children. Not kill them, he said. Just hurt them. Just enough to make the point clear. Sarah made the decision to comply with his demands. A van was brought to the loading dock. A white commercial vehicle with no markings, keys left in the ignition. The tank full of gasoline as requested. Officers positioned themselves strategically around the building, hidden in shadows, concealed behind structures. SWAT teams in place in multiple locations, ready to move at a moment's notice, ready to respond to any threat or opportunity. Snipers were positioned on nearby rooftops, their scopes trained on the warehouse entrance, their fingers resting lightly on triggers. And then, as the deadline approached, as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, the warehouse door opened again. As the warehouse door creaked open with an agonizing slowness, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation and dread. The tension was palpable, a living entity that wrapped around everyone present like a suffocating blanket woven from fear and uncertainty. Marcus crouched behind the sedan, every nerve in his body on high alert, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum, like the beating of 1,000 wings. He could see Vincent emerging from the shadows, his silhouette becoming clearer with each passing second, his face twisted into a mask of triumph mingled with a hint of madness that made him look almost inhuman. In his hands, he held a child, a girl perhaps 7 or 8 years old, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her small frame trembling as Vincent clutched her collar with a grip that looked dangerously tight, as if he were afraid she might slip away from him at any moment. "Here she is," Vincent shouted, his voice echoing through the stillness like a gunshot, like the crack of a whip, like the sound of something breaking. "This is Emma, one of the lucky ones. Now, where's my van? I want to see it right now, or this little girl is going to regret ever being born." He stepped forward, dragging the girl behind him, her feet barely keeping up with his long, aggressive strides. She looked terrified beyond measure, her eyes darting around frantically as if searching for a way out, a glimmer of hope in a hopeless situation, some miracle that might save her from this nightmare. The officers around the perimeter shifted slightly, their hands moving toward their weapons. But Sarah's voice cut through the radio with the force of a command that could not be disobeyed. "Hold your positions. Do not approach. Negotiation team is in contact." Maintain a safe distance. I repeat, maintain a safe distance. But it was clear to everyone watching that Vincent was escalating, that his mental state was deteriorating with each passing moment, and the situation was about to spiral out of control in ways that could not be predicted or prevented. "Let her go," Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife, like a blade aimed at Vincent's heart. "You've got what you wanted. Just let her go, and we can talk about the van. You're not a monster, Vincent. You don't want to hurt her. You have the power to do the right thing. You have the power to be someone better than this." Vincent laughed, a harsh, barking sound that echoed off the warehouse walls and seemed to reverberate through the entire street, filling every corner with the sound of his madness. "Oh, but I am a monster, detective. You just don't know the half of it. I'm the kind of monster who doesn't hesitate to pull the trigger if it means getting what he wants. I'm the kind of monster who has been created by a system that doesn't care about people like me. I'm the kind of monster who has nothing left to lose." He gestured with the detonator, his finger twitching dangerously close to the button, as if he might press it at any moment, as if the fate of everyone present hung on the whim of his unstable mind. "Now, where's my vehicle? I want to see it. I want it right here, right now, or this little girl gets a first-hand lesson in how serious I am. I'll hurt her in ways that will make her beg for death." Marcus felt his stomach drop as he watched the scene unfold, helpless to intervene, powerless to change the course of events that seemed to be spiraling toward a disaster. He could see the fear etched on Emma's face, the way she clung to Vincent's arm, trying to distance herself from the threat he embodied, trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear. Her small body was shaking, and Marcus could almost feel her terror radiating outward like a wave, like a force that could sweep them all away. "Just be calm, Emma," he whispered under his breath, though he knew she couldn't hear him, though his words would never reach her. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay. Hold on just a little bit longer. We're going to get you out of here. I promise you, we're going to get you out of here." The negotiation team was working frantically behind the scenes, trying to ensure that the van was ready without tipping Vincent off to their movements, without alerting him to the fact that they were preparing to move against him. Sarah kept the line open, speaking to Vincent, trying to keep him engaged, trying to keep him talking, trying to maintain the connection that might be the only thing standing between him and complete madness. "Let's talk about the van," Sarah said, her voice smooth and coaxing, like honey dripping from a spoon. "You want to make sure you're safe when you leave. You want to know that we're going to let you go without trying to stop you. We can arrange that. We can make this work for you. We can make sure that you get what you want. But you have to trust us. You have to show us you're willing to cooperate. You have to give us a sign that you're willing to work with us." But Vincent's expression darkened, the light fading from his eyes, replaced by something cold and empty and utterly devoid of humanity. He pulled Emma closer, making her whimper in fright, making her cry out in a voice so small and broken that it seemed to pierce through the very fabric of reality. "I'm done talking. I'm done with your games. You have 10 minutes to get my van here. 10 minutes and not a second more. Then we'll see who gets to leave this place and who gets to stay behind. And if you try anything funny, if you try to trick me or manipulate me or pull some kind of tactical maneuver, I swear I'll make her disappear faster than you can blink. I'll make her into a ghost. No one will ever find her. She'll just vanish into thin air, and you'll never know what happened to her." Panic surged through Marcus like a tidal wave, threatening to overwhelm him, threatening to pull him under into an abyss of despair. They were running out of time, and every second that ticked away felt like a countdown to disaster, like the ticking of a bomb that was about to explode. He could hear the distant wail of sirens, the echo of approaching units, the sound of more and more police vehicles arriving on the scene. He knew they were trying to buy time, trying to get everything in place for a potential rescue, trying to set up a situation where they could move against Vincent with minimal risk to the children. But every moment felt like a gamble, with lives hanging in the balance, like a game of chess where the stakes were the lives of innocent children. "Stay with me, Emma," he thought, his heart aching for the little girl caught in this nightmare, trapped in a situation she could never have imagined, suffering in ways that no child should ever have to suffer. "You're going to be okay. We're going to get you out of here. I don't know how and I don't know when, but I promise you that we're going to save you. You're going to survive this. You're going to walk out of that warehouse and see the sunlight again." As the tension mounted to almost unbearable levels, the mobile command unit buzzed with activity, every person inside moving with purpose and determination. Dr. Patricia Chen, the psychologist, was analyzing Vincent's behavior with the intensity of a scientist studying a complex organism, trying to understand his psychological state, trying to find the cracks in his armor, trying to identify the vulnerabilities that might be exploited. Robert Valdez coordinated with the tactical teams, his voice calm and steady, his experience evident in every word he spoke. They were all aware that this was a high-stakes situation, one that required a delicate touch, one that could end in tragedy if they made even a single mistake. "Vincent," Sarah continued, her voice calm and steady, never wavering, never showing the fear that must have been coursing through her veins. "If you let Emma go, we can talk about your demands. We can negotiate in good faith. I'll make sure you're treated fairly. I'll make sure that you're heard. You have my word as a police officer, and I don't give my word lightly." Vincent smirked, his eyes glinting with malice and contempt, his expression twisting into something that was barely recognizable as human. "Your word? What's that worth? What's the word of a cop worth in a world like this? I've heard promises before. I've heard people swear on their lives, swear on their families, swear on everything they hold dear. They mean nothing. They're just words, empty sounds that disappear into the air like smoke. I want my van, and I want it now. I want to see it pulled up to the loading dock, engines running, doors unlocked. Otherwise, I'll show you exactly how serious I am. I'll show you what happens when you don't take me at my word." Suddenly, the sound of a loud crash echoed from within the warehouse. A sound like something heavy falling, like something breaking, like something shattering into 1,000 pieces. Vincent's attention snapped back inside, his face contorting with anger and confusion, his entire body tensing as if he were preparing to spring into action. "What was that?" he shouted, his voice rising to a fever pitch, jerking Emma closer as if she were a shield between him and the chaos, as if holding her tight enough might protect him from whatever was happening inside. "What's going on in there? Who's moving around in my building? I swear, if you're trying to trick me, I'll—" Marcus's heart raced, beating so fast he thought it might burst from his chest. This was the distraction they needed, the opportunity they had been waiting for. Whatever had caused the noise might be an opportunity to act, to change the balance of power, to shift the situation in their favor. But they had to be careful. They had to move with precision and timing. If they moved too soon, if they acted before Vincent was sufficiently distracted, it could spell disaster for the children still inside, trapped in the darkness of that warehouse, waiting for rescue that might never come. "Vincent!" Sarah shouted, her voice rising above the chaos, cutting through the confusion like a beacon in the darkness. "Focus on me. Don't let anything inside distract you. You're in control here. You have all the power. I'm the one who needs to listen to you, not the other way around." But Vincent was already losing his grip on reality, his mental state deteriorating with each passing second, his control slipping away like sand through an hourglass. He turned back to Sarah, fury flickering in his eyes, rage burning in his gaze with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. "You think you can control this? You think you can manipulate me? You think you can play mind games with someone like me? You don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know what I'm capable of. You don't know the kinds of things I've seen, the kinds of things I've done." He raised the detonator higher, his finger pressing down just enough to send a shiver of fear through everyone present. Just enough to make everyone realize that they were truly on the edge of a precipice. That one wrong move could send them all tumbling into an abyss from which there would be no return. I've been part of something much bigger than you can imagine. I've been part of a network that spans the entire country, the entire world even. And if I go down, I'm taking everyone with me. I'm taking this entire warehouse and everyone in it down to hell. In a sudden moment of desperation, Marcus made a decision. He glanced at Duke, who was still alert and ready, muscles coiled like springs, eyes sharp and focused, and motioned for him to stay back, to remain in position, to be ready to move at a moment's notice. He needed to act. And he needed to act now, before the situation spiraled completely out of control. He could hear the sirens getting closer, the sound of more units arriving on the scene, the sound of the cavalry approaching. They had to buy time, had to keep Vincent distracted long enough for the tactical team to get into position, long enough for them to set up a scenario where they could move against him with some hope of success. "Vincent!" Marcus called out, stepping slightly out of cover, raising his hands in a gesture of peace, making sure Vincent could see that he was unarmed, that he posed no immediate threat. "I know you're scared. I know you feel trapped. I know you feel like the whole world is against you. But you don't have to take this further. You don't have to hurt anyone else. Let Emma go. Let the others go. You can still make a choice here. You can still be someone other than the villain in this story." Vincent's eyes narrowed, and he shifted his attention to Marcus, anger flashing in his gaze, contempt curling his lip. "Who the hell are you? You think you can just waltz in here and change the game? You think you can just talk to me like I'm some kind of fool who can be reasoned with? You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about me or my situation." "I might not know everything, but I do know one thing," Marcus said, his voice steady and strong, unwavering despite the danger, despite the knowledge that Vincent might press that button at any moment. "You're not a monster. You're a person who made a terrible mistake. You're a person who got caught up in something bigger than yourself. But you can still undo it. You can still do the right thing. You can still save those children. You can still be a hero instead of a villain." For a moment, the tension hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. And it felt like the world had stopped again, like time itself had frozen in place. Vincent's expression flickered between rage and uncertainty. And Marcus could see the internal struggle warring within him, could see the battle between the darkness that had consumed him and whatever light might still remain somewhere deep inside his soul. This was the moment they needed. If they could reach him, if they could get through to him, if they could make him understand that there was still a way out, they might just save those children. They might just pull them back from the brink of disaster. "I'm not afraid of you," Marcus continued, his voice unwavering, his conviction absolute. "I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to condemn you. I'm just here to tell you that there's still a way out. You don't have to hurt anyone else. You don't have to be the villain in this story. You don't have to be remembered as a monster. You can change your narrative. You can become someone different. You can become someone better. Vincent hesitated, his grip on the detonator wavering slightly, his finger relaxing just a fraction of an inch. And for an instant, it seemed as if the darkness surrounding him might lift, as if the weight of his choices might shift, as if there might be some glimmer of hope, some possibility of redemption, some chance that this nightmare might end without tragedy. But then, just as quickly, the anger returned, fueled by desperation and fear, and the knowledge that his time was running out. "Shut up. You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like to be me. You don't know what it's like to be trapped in a system that doesn't care about you, that treats you like you're less than human," he shouted, the moment of vulnerability gone, replaced once again by rage and fury. "I'll show you what I can do. I'll show you all what happens when you push someone like me too far." Just then, the sound of a second crash echoed from within the warehouse, followed by the unmistakable sound of children crying out, their voices rising. The sound of the children's cries pierced through the air like daggers of pure anguish, each voice a thread of despair woven into a tapestry of suffering that seemed to encompass the entire world. The cries were raw and primal, the sounds of young voices pushed to the absolute limits of their endurance. Voices that had been stripped of hope and dignity by circumstances beyond their comprehension. They echoed off the warehouse walls, reverberating through the streets, reaching the ears of every officer present, every negotiator, every soul who had gathered to bear witness to this unfolding tragedy. Vincent's face twisted into an expression of pure rage, his entire body convulsing with the force of his anger. His grip on Emma tightened, and the little girl let out a whimper that cut through Marcus like a knife. The detonator in his other hand began to shake, trembling with the violence of his emotional upheaval, and Marcus realized with a sickening certainty that they were running out of time faster than anyone had anticipated. "No, not again!" Vincent screamed, his voice rising to a fever pitch, his words tumbling out in a frantic cascade. "What's happening in there? What are you doing to them? You're all going to pay for this, every single one of you. I'll make sure of it." Sarah's voice crackled over the radio, urgent and commanding, but also tinged with a note of desperation that hadn't been there before. "All units, stand by. Do not move. Do not engage. We are maintaining negotiation protocols. Repeat, maintain negotiation protocols." But Marcus could see that the situation was deteriorating rapidly, that Vincent was losing his grip on sanity with each passing second. The man's eyes had taken on a wild, almost feral quality, as if something fundamental within him had snapped, as if the last threads holding him to reality were unraveling before everyone's eyes. "Vincent, listen to me," Sarah called out, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "Listen to me carefully. Whatever is happening in there, it's not what you think. It's not an attack, it's just—" "Don't lie to me," Vincent interrupted, his voice cutting through her words like a blade. "Don't you dare lie to me. I know what's happening. They're trying to trick me. They're trying to make me lose focus. Well, it's not going to work. I'm smarter than all of you. I'm stronger than all of you." Marcus's mind raced, analyzing the situation, calculating probabilities, trying to find some angle, some approach that might still save the day. But with each passing second, the odds seemed to shift further and further against them. Vincent was becoming increasingly unstable, increasingly unpredictable, and the children inside the warehouse were suffering, were crying out in voices that grew more desperate with each passing moment. "Vincent!" Marcus called out again, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "I understand you're angry. I understand you feel betrayed. But those children in there, they haven't done anything to you. They're innocent. They're just kids. They don't deserve what's happening to them. Let them go, please. I'm begging you. Let them go. Vincent's eyes snapped toward Marcus, and for a moment, something flickered in those eyes. Something that might have been humanity, might have been conscience, might have been the last vestige of whatever good might have once existed within him. But it was fleeting, a brief glimpse before the darkness returned, before the madness reasserted itself. You want to know what's funny? Vincent said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than his shouts. You want to know what's really funny? I don't even care about the money anymore. I don't even care about the van. I don't care about any of it. The only thing I care about now is making sure that everyone understands what they've done. Everyone understands the consequences of their actions. Everyone understands that you can't just toy with people like me and expect there to be no repercussions. He looked down at Emma, and for a moment, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. The little girl looked up at him with eyes that were wide with terror, eyes that seemed to contain all the innocence and purity of childhood, eyes that should never have been forced to witness the kind of evil that Vincent embodied. And in that moment, Marcus saw something shift in Vincent's face, saw something that might have been regret, might have been a moment of clarity, might have been the awakening of conscience. But then Vincent's jaw clenched, and he looked away, as if he couldn't bear to see the humanity in the child he was holding, as if acknowledging her innocence would be too much for him to bear. You know what the worst part is? Vincent continued, his voice hollow and empty. The worst part is that I used to be like them. I used to be innocent. I used to believe that the world was a good place, that people were fundamentally decent, that if you worked hard and played by the rules, you'd be rewarded. I used to believe in things. I used to have dreams. I used to have hope. He paused, and in that pause, Marcus heard the sound of footsteps inside the warehouse, the sound of movement, the sound of someone or something moving through the darkness. His heart leaped. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The tactical team must have found a way inside. They must have found a breach, a window, a door, some way to get into the warehouse without Vincent knowing. What was that? Vincent's head snapped toward the warehouse entrance, his attention diverted for just a fraction of a second. What's going on in there? I told you not to try anything. I told you what would happen if you tried to trick me. This was the moment. This was their window of opportunity. Marcus made a split-second decision. He raised his hand and gave the signal to Duke, a subtle gesture that the dog had been trained to recognize, a command that meant only one thing: move. Duke exploded from his hiding place like a furry missile, his powerful body covering the distance between him and Vincent in what seemed like a single bound. The dog's jaws were open, his teeth bared, his entire being focused on one objective: disarm the threat, protect the innocent, save the child. Vincent saw the dog coming, and for a moment, his expression registered pure shock. His finger twitched on the detonator, and Marcus's heart nearly stopped. But in that crucial instant, as Vincent's attention was divided between the approaching dog and the child he was holding, Sarah made her move. She sprinted forward, her weapon drawn but not yet fired, her eyes fixed on Vincent with the intensity of a predator closing in on its prey. Behind her came the SWAT team, their weapons raised, their movements synchronized and precise, their training evident in every step they took. "Drop the detonator!" Sarah screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos like a clarion call. "Drop it now, or we will drop you." Vincent's face contorted with rage and desperation. He raised the detonator higher, his finger pressing down on the button with increasing pressure. "You think you can beat me? You think you can outsmart me? I'll blow this whole place to kingdom come." But Duke was faster. The dog's massive body collided with Vincent at full speed, and the impact sent the man flying backward, his grip on Emma loosening. The little girl was thrown clear, tumbling through the air, and Marcus watched in horror as she fell toward the pavement. But Sarah was there. She caught Emma mid-fall, cradling the child in her arms, pulling her away from the chaos, pulling her to safety. At the same time, the SWAT team converged on Vincent, their weapons trained on him, their voices shouting commands that he could not ignore. "Drop the detonator. Drop it now. Hands in the air. Hands where we can see them." Vincent struggled against Duke's weight. The dog's powerful jaws clamped down on his arm, the detonator still clutched in his hand. Blood ran down his arm where Duke's teeth had broken the skin, and his face was contorted with pain and rage in equal measure. "Let him go!" Vincent screamed at the dog. "Let me go! I'll blow everything up! I swear I will!" But Duke didn't let go. The dog held firm, his training overriding any instinct to release his grip. His entire being focused on keeping the threat neutralized until the human handlers could take over. One of the SWAT team members moved forward with practiced efficiency, his taser drawn. He pressed it against Vincent's leg, and the electrical charge coursed through the man's body, causing his muscles to seize and convulse. His grip on the detonator weakened, and in that moment, another officer swept in and ripped the device from his hand. "Got it!" the officer shouted. "Detonator is secure." Vincent collapsed to the ground, his body going limp, the fight draining out of him as quickly as it had come. Duke released his grip and stepped back, his chest heaving, his eyes still fixed on the threat until he received the all-clear signal from Marcus. But the nightmare wasn't over. There were still children inside the warehouse, still innocent lives hanging in the balance. And as the officers moved to secure Vincent, as they cuffed him and began reading him his rights, Marcus turned his attention to the warehouse entrance. "We need to get those kids out," he shouted, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the arrest. "There are still children inside. We need to move now." Sarah, still holding Emma, nodded urgently. "Breach the warehouse. Get those children out of there. Move, move, move." The SWAT team didn't hesitate. They moved toward the warehouse entrance with weapons drawn, their movements swift and purposeful. But as they approached the door, it swung open from the inside, and what they found made their blood run cold. There, standing in the darkness, were 5 more children. They were thin, malnourished, their eyes hollow with the kind of suffering that comes from prolonged captivity and abuse. They looked like ghosts, like shadows of the children they should have been. Behind them, in the deeper darkness of the warehouse, there was movement. Figures that seemed to melt into the shadows, figures that were trying to escape through the back of the building. "We've got runners," one of the officers shouted into his radio. Multiple suspects attempting to flee through the rear of the warehouse. All units converge on the back exit. Marcus didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the warehouse, Duke at his side, his mind focused on one objective: catch those bastards before they could disappear into the night, before they could vanish back into whatever shadows they had crawled out of. As he reached the warehouse entrance, he could see the 5 children being guided to safety by the SWAT team members, their hands gentle despite their weapons, their voices soft and reassuring. Emergency medical personnel were already on scene, ready to provide aid, ready to begin the long process of healing that these children would need. But Marcus's attention was on the figures fleeing through the back of the warehouse. He could see them now, silhouetted against the lights of the police vehicles that were converging on the rear exit. There were at least 3 of them, maybe 4, moving with the desperation of people who knew their time was up, who understood that their operation had been exposed. Marcus accelerated, his legs pumping, his lungs burning, his entire being focused on the pursuit. Duke ran alongside him, the dog's powerful body moving with fluid grace, his eyes locked on the targets. The first suspect burst through the rear door of the warehouse and immediately turned left, trying to disappear into the maze of alleys and side streets that surrounded the industrial complex. But he hadn't counted on the officers that Sarah had positioned there. Officers who had anticipated this exact scenario, who were waiting with weapons drawn and patience that seemed infinite. "Stop! Police! Drop to the ground, now!" The suspect skidded to a halt, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape route, looking for any possible way out. But there was none. He was surrounded, boxed in, trapped with nowhere to go. For a moment, it seemed as if he might try to make a run for it anyway, might try to break through the line of officers that had formed a barrier against escape. But then he saw Duke, saw the massive dog straining against Marcus's grip, saw the determination in the dog's eyes, and something in him seemed to break. He fell to his knees, his hands raised in surrender, his face contorted with despair. "I give up!" he shouted. "I give up! Don't let the dog get me! I give up!" The officers moved in quickly, securing him, cuffing him, reading him his rights. But there were still more suspects, still more people involved in this network of evil that had preyed on innocent children. Marcus pushed forward, following the trail of the remaining suspects. He could hear the sound of sirens, the sound of officers converging from all directions, the sound of a net closing in on its prey. This was it. This was the moment when the darkness would be exposed to the light, when the shadows would be forced to retreat, when justice would finally begin to take its course. But as Marcus ran through the alleys, as he pursued the fleeing suspects, he knew that this was just the beginning. This was just one warehouse, one operation, one small piece of a much larger puzzle. The network that Vincent had spoken of, the organization that had been trafficking children for God knew how long, was still out there. There were still people in positions of power who were protecting this operation, who were profiting from it, who were allowing it to continue. And Marcus swore to himself, as he ran through the darkness with Duke at his side, that he would not rest until every last one of them was brought to justice. He would not stop until every child was safe. He would not give up until the darkness had been completely and utterly vanquished.